laughing, and the kind of conversations we had as well. I talked to her about anything. She was really my best friend. Always talked to her about boys, always. You know, I could talk to her more about that stuff than I could with my own mum. So really? My mum, who's her mum, would be like, oh, Leah, you know, make her blush. But with my gran, it's like, we talked about boys. We talked about sex. She was so real, but she also taught me what love is. And she also taught me about putting things in God's hands as well, and just having trust. And so to lose her was very unexpected. And by the way, I lost my grandmother in July 29th, 2020. And she was obviously in St Lucia. And the funny thing was, when the pandemic started, I said to my mum, I'm gonna go to St Lucia and just ride out the pandemic there, because that was always my go-to place. Yeah. That was my happy place. Everyone knew that. So even before I had issues with mental health in the past, before I even knew what those issues were, whenever I felt overwhelmed, depressed, upset, I would scrape together whatever money I had, whether it was a lot or a little, because it all depended where I was in life. And I would just get to St Lucia. My granny would say she knew I was ever upset or depressed. I remember this before I was even diagnosed with anything. She would just say, just get here, get here. And I knew that if I got to her, I would be loved and I would be fed and I would be filled back up until I could go back and face the world again. And so that place is a very special place for me, but it's only special because she was there. And I expected her to be there forever. And now she's gone. That happy place for me, I'm like, all my friends and all the sort of things that I have there, the home, and that it pales into comparison. It's empty. And so last year, I'll explain to you, on the 29th of July 2020, I got a FaceTime from my mum. My mum FaceTimes me almost every day. So, but it was morning, and it was, I don't know, I just had a strange feeling. And she was in tears, and it was, you know, I just don't even want to go there in my mind, but she explained through it that my grandmother had passed. And at that moment, the world just fell apart for me. I was like, what? Wow, it just doesn't even make sense to me even now. You know, we spoke to her the night before. She was fine. The last couple of weeks of her life, she'd been feeling, you know, a bit unwell. And the doctors kept saying that it was, you know, things to do with one health issue, and it wasn't. It was actually something that if they detected, she would have still been here with us. That's the sad part of it. You know, it feels in those times a bit unfair, but then in a time where so many lives has been lost over the last year, it's just, what can you say? Like every single life, whether it's to COVID or not to COVID, like with my grandmother, is still a loss. Do you see what I mean? What made it even harder was we were in the middle of a pandemic and she was in St Lucia. And we as a big family who were always in St Lucia, we needed to get there, but this was now in second lockdown. And we were just coming out of the second lockdown. And to cut a long story short, between taking the COVID test and whether they just, you know, let the flights go out again. So about 2 weeks later, we were allowed to travel to St Lucia, but we had to go into a 2-week quarantine at a hotel somewhere on the other side of the island. So by the time we actually got to my poor grandfather and our home, it had been a month since my grandmother passed. And we had to spend a month in St Lucia trying to sort things out. Now, part of my grandmother's wishes was for her to be repatriated to the UK and buried here with her son, my uncle, God rest his soul, Uncle Mitch, who passed away tragically. And what's the word I'm looking for? We don't know how. What's the word?
Unexplained?
Unexplained circumstances, that's right, at the age of 30. And that was a big tragedy for the family back then. I was 9 years old and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. And that was the first time that I've really experienced death in that way. Other people had died in my life up until the age of 9. I remember a kid at school. I remember, you know, another family member, you know, other things like that, but nothing until Uncle Mitch was, you know, found dead at home. That just was, and you can imagine. So her wishes were, no matter what happens, I want to be buried with my child when my time comes. And we always knew that. So it was up to the family of who could afford to go, who could travel. You know, we're in the middle of COVID and all that stuff. And of course, to me, no brainer. I had to get there. I had to get regardless. Yesterday. Do you know what I mean? I had to get there. And about 20 of us went, I think, in the family, or maybe about 15 or so, and obviously met the rest of the family out there. And it was tough. It was tough. What happened after that was tough. Even just to travel. I mean, imagine in a global pandemic, there's one thing losing someone, another thing being so far away. And I know many people experienced that because when we were in quarantine in the hotel, we met many other people who had lost people and they were also there quarantining.
It's different.
It was tough. It was hard, but it was almost very dreamlike in a way. And I naturally fell into this role of organizing. And it's weird because I'm obviously I'm the one in the family who has mental health issues. However, I was very close to my granny. We all knew what her wishes were. And I do have certain skills where I'm a very good organizer. I'm very good at organizing and very much attention to detail person. And trying to repatriate somebody and organize a service in St Lucia for family and friends there, repatriate my grandmother to England, and
like
then
the logistics is very
have a funeral
complex.
here. Remember, she would be being buried with Uncle Mitch, which meant that that grave now needs to be opened, and there was just so much logistics. And although the family are really big, everybody was struggling in their own way. They all did what they could. You see what I mean? For what they could, whether it was big or whether it was small, it didn't matter. The point was we had to do her proud, and we had to give her a great send-off and carry out her wishes, which was to bring her here. But my gosh, during any time that would have been hard, especially because it was unexpected. If she was in what we could see, of course, she was getting older and she was growing older, of course, right? But she was still very active. You know, she was still cooking every day, tending to her garden, doing chores, you know, going to the village country and western dance, you know, and dancing quite happily all evening. You know, she was doing all those things. So it wasn't like she was getting very old and frail and she was sort of, you know, it was hard for her to move about. No. So the shock of it and everything being so sudden, to try and console your mind to that, plus then having to get there in a pandemic and handle all those logistics, come back and do that. I mean, she passed away in July and the funeral didn't take place till the end of September. That just shows you how long that process was. So up until that point, there was no chance of grieving for me. It was like, you just got to do this, like, for your grand.
It's almost like the pressure of having her wishes carried out was on you, but at the same time, it's like that takes full control of everything. So you can't kind of not put your grief to one side, but you kind of have to just like, right, delay that so I can just do this for my grandma and then maybe once that's done, it's like then you can kind of express.
Grieve. That's exactly what I
grieve.
thought.
Like,
that's exactly what I thought. I thought, you know what? My grief is going to come and it's going to stay for what I can see a very long time. But what needs to be done now.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
now is not a time to crumble. And maybe in a way, I was the most qualified to do it in the family, in a sense, not because of my organization skills, but because of the skills of knowing what it's like to be right crushed and have to get up and present live TV anyway, have to get up and be this person. Because remember, I for those who know, I hid my mental health for many years. You know, I'd tried suicidal attempts and I went through a time of mania, and I was very ill at one point. But yet I was still functioning.
Yeah.
And so there is this part of me intrinsically inside that can claw their way through, do what needs to be done in one part of my brain, even if the other part is completely crushed. I've done it before. I did it for years. And, you know, in this point, I did it again, not happily, but in a way of, I was glad it was me. I wouldn't change it for the world. You know, like I said, we all did come collectively together as a family. Everyone did what they could do. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But I knew that when it came to these, you know, attention to details, my mum would say herself, you know, even to me, she couldn't do it. She couldn't do what I did. She just could not handle it. She couldn't.
I think that's a lot of pressure though for anyone, but for you having to kind of go through what you're going through and having to do that, like it's, I don't know, would you say there was a time when the pressure kind of got a lot, or would you just feel like, you know what, I've got to do this, so I can't think about anything else, but let me just get through this?
It was more get through this because, you know, whilst we were on that trip, because we can't call it holiday, obviously, when we were on that trip, the hardest trip to St Lucia that we've ever experienced. I mean, imagine 2 weeks quarantining, and really you're just used to being able to jump on a flight, whether it's in an emergency or whether it's because you just want a holiday. We're used to being able to just make a flight and fly out the next day if we wanted to. And in 8 hours, we're in St Lucia, and an hour from there, we're going to be home, and we'll see Bea on the balcony, or really not even on the balcony, at the airport gates itself, you know, waving her flag almost, waiting for us. So that's all she lived for, was when are you coming, Leah? When are you coming? When's the next time you're coming? You know, and that was the conversation she had with all of us. And you can imagine that was the hardest trip to St Lucia that we ever had to do, the hardest trip to go to the home, but to for 2 weeks sit in quarantine. And of all of us there, you know, I watched every single family member have their own breakdowns or their own challenges at different points on that trip. And what was so weird was that I was like this person. It's just weird. I can't really explain it. But I felt like I was there for a lot of people. In fact, I know I was there for a lot of people, and that's the truth. And, you know, I would, and I'm not saying it for kudos or anything, but I'm saying it in a way of, that was the role I fell into. Do you see what I mean? Because for me, I just felt like I would deal with this later. I would deal with my own stuff later. You know, right now, that cousin is literally having a breakdown over there. That aunt is really struggling. You know, that uncle isn't doing so great. And I found myself over that month that we were away, having different conversations with people every day, but also having to deal with the UK and the, you know, all the different authorities and the funeral homes and the different places here, but also in St Lucia as well. So it was a lot. And I feel like sometimes that is underestimated by my family. But I feel like that is just a general thing in terms of, because of my mental illness. And that's a story that I've spoken about quite publicly, separately. You know, that in the beginning with my mental illness, it wasn't really taken seriously or understood in my family. Like with many Black families, it was kind of either pushed away, pushed under the carpet, not spoken about.
it's like a taboo sometimes.
Yeah, and we're far ahead of that now, you know, and there is a lot more understanding and a lot more grace. But for me, it was that moment of the sink or swim, do or die. Right now, Leah, you need to do this. It really is what it is. You will. It's not say I wasn't crying or I wasn't taking stock of my emotions, because it's important to do that. I knew I had to do that in order to not allow myself to become ill. But what I did know was my grief would stay. I'm still in a space of shock. It's all still raw. We've just got to do what we've got to do. And so I kind of became the counsellor and the listener and the wiping the tear and the organizer and the whatever. But you know what? It was my honor. It was really my honor. I'm glad that I was able to do that. And I know that the only reason I was able to do that is because of all the stuff that I'd gone through with my mental health in the past, pretty much by myself, and had to claw my way back. Do you understand? That's where that strength came from. So going through all of that, all I hear is my gran, who would say to me, it's okay, Ishmael, which means my child in patois, in Creole. You know, it's okay, Ishmael. God will give you strength. God will give you strength. God understands. You will be blessed. And that is what I heard throughout in my spirit. That is what I heard. That makes more sense now. Yeah. And it was just like, okay, you know, I'll do what I need to do. I will be okay. She was a God-fearing woman. And although it happened suddenly, myself and, you know, I've had different conversations with family members. You have to sometimes look at the blessings, as hard as it is to accept the loss. For us, for me, I can only speak for myself and say, you know, I would have hated to have seen my granny get ill and have a really slow process. Like, do you know what I mean? I what do you choose? Do you choose a chance of saying goodbye? Or do you choose, like, it's happened very suddenly, before she would even have known what had happened, she was gone. And he's a believer, I'm a believer, which means that she is where she should be, you know, by the grace of God. Do you understand? And in the greater picture, if you are also a believer, then, you know, all these kind of things you kind of reconcile in your mind and say, we will meet again. Like, you have to kind of do this in your mind. But obviously the loss is the loss. I don't think I'm ever going to get over it. I walk past her pictures and things and I shake my head still, because I'm like, I can't even believe this has happened. And I can't believe I left the country in a pandemic and came all the way back. But that trip was actually heartbreaking, but it was the most poignant and most special, in a way, trip. Even down to attention to detail, that I got my gran on that same flight home with us back to the UK.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
I went in, that's how my brain works. And that's why I just felt like I've been chosen to do this. Because I'm sure many of my family would say to you, they wouldn't even think of that in their grief. Everyone's grieving in their own way. You can't judge it. Do you see what I mean?
That's strength,
even down to that, she was, and it was hard knowing, flying back, knowing my granny's on this plane with us. But at the same time, I am so glad that she was on that plane with us and we brought her home with us. Do you understand?
Honestly, that's a testament to your strength, because you see what it is with grief is like, it's hard, it is, as I said before, but to kind of put things aside and step up and do things you need to do, that's not easy. Like, that isn't easy, because it's like you're dealing with I don't know how to put it. It's just like you're dealing with your own things as well. And then on top of that, coming from such a big family, you have to now kind of like, right, you know, I've got to do this. It's a lot of pressure, and I have to just like give you your flowers, man, because
bless you.
Honestly, like, I
thank you. I appreciate that, but I don't want flowers. For me, it's the least I can do. Do you know how much she gave me? I can't even begin to explain just the love alone. When I had nowhere to go, when I wasn't eating, when I wasn't sleeping, when I was manic, when I was low, when I was depressed, when I was suicidal. that's where I ran.
Mm.
In the service the memorial we had in St Lucia, I did the eulogy along with my cousin Karen. At the funeral here, I also did the eulogy with my cousin Karen. You know, down to, I designed both memorial, was it the order of service?
Yeah.
And there's so much to do, isn't it? There's just so much to do when someone, like, it just blows your mind. Like, I'd never been in that situation before. Yeah, and it was tough, I have to say. I'm not even sitting here glossing over it. And it was tough. It was really tough, but just with my right mindset, I have to go, do you know what? If anyone was chosen, I'm glad it was me. I'm glad. God knew. And, you know, she knew, she, interceded for that, was that Leah's got that mind. She's got that mind. She's not going to forget anything, you know, and that was that part of my granny that I took. She was so shrewd and clever in the nicest way. Do you see what I mean? She thought about detail. She thought about everything. And I'm glad that I was able, I mean, here's a picture that I've got here.
Oh.
Of us.
Is that your granddad?
My grandpa, yeah.
That's so bliss, man.
And she's just like so gorgeous and just so, you know, just so like, she was just like full of personality and was just
Is
funny.
Is she looking at you in that? Are you in that? Is she looking at you in that?
No, I found this at the home when we went, and you know, we would do some memories and stuff like that. So this was in St Lucia. This was taken years back. But I just liked it, you know, and she was just a great poser. Like I said, like you can see in this, you know, she knew how to take a good picture. I am my granny's child, you know, put a camera in front of her. She knows how to pose.
That's what you get from.
Yeah, you know, and just sassy. And as you can see, very beautiful. And I'd seen even you know, at her age, how men still, you know, would ask her to dance at the party, would still sort of chat her up, you know. I witnessed that even up until she left us. She was a very attractive woman to many, just in personality, and because she, you know, in my opinion, I'm biased, I know, but just beautiful lady to look at. So you can imagine in her day, she was very popular, I'm sure, you know. And but she had the charm to go with it. And I know that I very much have that kind of charm as well. And a few of us in the family have that kind of same charm that we have when we're interacting and speaking with people. Yeah. And I definitely feel that I get it from her. You know, she had a cheekiness about her. And I was just able to always be me. And I'm a very cheeky person, usually the funny one, and blah. And we were able to do that together. You know, she'd always say, be careful with men, because I'd be like, oh, this one this week and that one next week. And then she'd be like, they always wonderful. They're like angels at the beginning, and they turn out to be devils after a few weeks when you've got to know them. And I'll call her the next time and go, yeah, you were right about that one. Yeah. He was an angel in the beginning, and now, yeah, he's not great. So she had lots of advice when it came to men.
Like, she seemed like she was everything to you, not only a grandma, a counselor, a friend, someone you can literally like say things to without, you know, like when you can just say things without no judgment. And it's just like, it's definitely, this person is not going to say anything, not going to see me in any different light. And that is special, because I'm not saying people don't have that or it's rare, but it's special because sometimes
it is. When you find that,
honestly, like I feel like you just value that even more. And maybe that's why you had that special bond, you know, because maybe that's why, you know, St Lucia was your like safe, your happy place, you know, like, because your grandma is everything to you, and she's just the person, you know what, I can just, you know, like, I can tell Granny, I know, like, she's not gonna look at me.
Literally,
why'd you do this?
I could tell her anything, absolutely anything, and there was never, ever, ever judgment. Like I said, we talk about anything. And I know there are many people in this world who've never even met their grandparents. Do you see what I mean? Maybe because they were deceased before they were even born.
Yeah.
And some who do know their grandparents may even have great relationships with them, but can never sit and talk about sex openly, or boys or girls or women. Do you know what I mean? Like, look, you're like, what? Like, that blows your mind. I'm smiling because I'm thinking of all the scandalous conversations that she's not telling me personally about her stuff, but I could say to her, well, this happened and that. I mean, there is a limit to how deep.
Yeah, of course.
But we could just talk about it's very frank, normal conversation. Everything was on the table. You could just say what you want. It was never like, oh my God. If anything, she'd go, oh my gosh, Leah, you make me laugh. She'd go, my crazy granddaughter, but in a nice way. She wasn't literally calling me crazy, but she'd be like, you're just so funny. You make me laugh. And she just allowed me to really just be me. And she just loved it when I'd come to be with her. Always my favorite meal would be on the stove. As soon as I got there, and I've got videos of that. And I'm so pleased that I've got videos of arriving home, going, Ms Bea, I'm here. And her coming out. And I've also, the last video, the last time I saw her, which was about 6 months before she passed, I've got a video of saying, bye, Ms Bea, I love you. And she's on the balcony. She wanted to take me to the airport. And I'm like, no, it's a late flight. I'm just going to go. You stay home. So she's on the balcony and I'm going, bye, I love you. And she's going, I love you too, see you soon, God willing. Because always she say that. Whenever we have a phone conversation or in person, it was always speak to you soon, God willing. And she always drummed into us, there will come a day I may not be here. I hope God gives me long life. She would always say that. We go, stop being so morbid. That would be us. Don't want to hear it. Don't like to hear you talking like that. She was so like, well, typical West Indian grandparent, I may not be here, and it's God's timing, she would say to us. It's God's timing. It's not our time. And I want to be with you guys forever. But one day you will come here and I'm not here. Now, we never wanted to hear that. And I certainly didn't expect to even be in that situation at any point. She was the type of granny you'd expect to get really, really, really old. You know what I mean? And that's what you kind of hope for, I guess, with anyone.
Exactly. Like at least 100, 105. Like,
do you know what I mean?
110 at a push.
Just pass away gracefully in their sleep and blah, blah, blah. And so when something like that happens, it just obviously just knocks you sideways because, yes, granted, I recognize we're all getting older in life and I understand that is part of life cycle, which is what she would drum into us in a nice way, although we found it quite morbid, but that's why that's how I reconciled it for me anyway, is that she wasn't afraid to die. She wasn't afraid to meet her maker. She prayed every day. She read her scriptures every day. She went to church several times a week, the village church. And she believed. And to me, she was blessed in life and she was blessed in death, because imagine it was at a time where we couldn't travel for longer because of COVID.
Yeah.
Imagine if we couldn't bring her here for her wishes to be buried here. Do you see what I mean?
It'll be devastating.
Like I can't even. So there's a part of my mind that I have to reconcile at the fact that she didn't suffer and we were able to carry out her wishes. I have to say that and know that this is part of life, that one day I'm not going to be here, one day you're not, and I don't even want to think about these things.
Same.
I don't want to think about other family members. I don't want to think about anything like that. So, but I have to, in order to keep my mind preserved, so to speak, I have to be rational and say, this hurts, this sucks, this is horrible. But my God, imagine it could have been 10 times worse, because if we couldn't get out there, if we couldn't deliver her wishes, if any of us had had a negative or a positive COVID test, we weren't allowed to travel. So many things could have gone even more wrong on top of that. Those are the things that would have sent me.
Yeah, like it's like
those
you're even
things that would have, because those are the frustrations of life that I couldn't. Do you understand? When you're trying to just get to a country, you've already got quarantine for 2 weeks somewhere and you can't even get home. But then if somebody in the family got a positive test or and we weren't able to travel, or they said, sorry, no, you can't have a funeral for her, or you can't, do you know what I mean? At least by the time we had the funeral, we were able to have a decent funeral. We weren't able to have a wake, but, you know, we were able to have family members there. It wasn't, as you know, we did do a Zoom as well for those who couldn't make it, but people were able to come. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't the big funeral that for someone as popular like Ms Bea would have expected, particularly in the area we grew up on the Harrow Road in West London. That is a big community of Caribbean people, and so they all flock out, you know, when one of their own passes. So it would have been one of those really big Harrow Road funerals, but because of COVID, it prevented that. But at least she had something, because if those other things had gone in the way, that would have been the stuff that would have sent me ill. Right now, I could kind of just reconcile and say, God, I don't know why, you know, you've taken my grannies from us so soon. But equally, I can't question God like that, because I feel like he held us that whole time. He really did. He really did. For me, I have to give him the glory. So when people like yourself say, where did you get the strength for? I rate you or give you, I'm like, nah, God gets the glory for that, because that was nothing I did. Seriously, I was just like walking in faith and not by sight. Trust me, just take it every day. And as it comes now, I'm still piecing together the process and going through, you know, those things that I'm sure you've gone through, and many, many others, and particularly in this last year, the year of the pandemic, the year that none of us expected to see. We've all got a story. Every single one of us in this last 12 months has a story. And I believe that everyone knows someone at least who has lost at least one person. So we've all gone through it, and we're all united in a way in our grief. So I take one day as it comes, you know, but I love my granny and I miss her. I'm just looking at her now. I can't believe it, but I can't stare too long at the pictures either, because I can get a bit like mind blown.
Yeah, I have a similar, like with my mom, even like it's been 5 years and sometimes I wake up like, nah, maybe it's someone's gonna tell me this was all like some sort of joke. Like it's not, because it just like it doesn't make sense. I'm thinking like, and I always something I always remember, like, well, two things I always remember was when I spoke to her 2 weeks before she passed and the day she passed, and I was like, because we had got a call from back home in Nigeria, and I was like, maybe they just got it wrong. Maybe it was that's a mistake, because you know, and I wouldn't have been mad. Okay, cool, you got it wrong, like, but I was like, no, like it can't be, like. And I was like, I spoke to her 2 weeks ago. Actually, I remember it clearly. She asked me, "Are you guys okay? Is there, like, you know, is there food in the house?" I was like, yeah. That's fine. Even before she traveled, I remember like literally just giving her, "Oh yeah, see you in 2 weeks." Because I remember the time it was my cousin's wedding at the time, and we was like, "Oh yeah." So we gave her like some cloth to go and have made in Nigeria. I was like, "Oh yeah, when you come back, we'll come back with the cloth." I was like, "Yeah, it's fine. Like, I'm gonna say it's not in 2 weeks." So when I got the call, she's gone. I was like, nah, that's you're someone's playing games. Someone's playing games, and it's like, but like even I resonate with what you're saying, because like that strength, like you don't obviously you know you had it because your grandma always was like your biggest like fan, and you know you've dealt with your own mental health, so you know like, okay, that's where it comes from. But for me, I've never dealt with like this before. I just thought, where am I? I'm done. Like I'm done. Life as I know it is done.
I know, but at that point, I just felt like, and I'm sure you did because you got through it. You're here to tell the tale. It's like, who am I at this point? That's how I felt. Anyway, that's just, you know, everyone feels differently. But I thought, who am I to crumble at this point? I could crumble afterwards. Right now, I've got this is the last thing that I could possibly do for this lady. The last thing, it's no point in 2 months' time going, okay, I'm ready now because I've had my crumble.
Yeah. That's
it was not for me. I can't speak for anybody else.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
me, there was not even a discussion in their head. My crumble, my moments, my whatever time is going to have to wait. I have to do, this is the last thing that I can do for this lady, and the time is now. I have to do it. I can't procrastinate. It needs to be done now. Right now, we move, we act, you know?
Yeah.
And I would imagine you did that yourself as well. Do you know what I mean? And you did what needed to be done.
Do you know what? I think I like that, because I think often, and again, we're only, for those listening, we're only speaking for ourselves. It's not to say that someone else should go and do this, and however everyone has to deal with it is how they deal with it. Do you know what I mean? But I just feel like with me, I think it was a moment of like, if I don't go, and I think the hardest thing for me with that whole process was like going to see her. Like I was scared before. When I came back, I promise you, I kid you not, I think when I came back, I slept with a light on for like 2 weeks, because that image in my head, I was like finished. I was like,
and you had to see her, to seeing is believing, so to speak.
That.
Yeah, it was the same with us. You know, it was like I said, we were in quarantine for 2 weeks. Soon as we got out of quarantine, it was like, right, okay. The day we got out, we went straight to the home, as you can imagine. And then 2 days after that, because there wasn't much time by then, you know, 2 days after that, we went to see her. And that was, that was like, okay, this is real. At that point, you know, we've been to the house, and we're like, this is just weird. It's like she's gone to the village, and she'll be back at any moment now. Any moment now, she'll be back. But yeah, everyone's here, everyone's crying. You could feel she's just not here. My poor grandfather, blah, 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 blah. And we're just like, but now she's coming back. You know, exactly like what you said. No. For me, though, that day that I got the call from my mum saying my gran had passed, I called one of our family members, or messaged one of our family members who lives next door in St Lucia. And I just said, is it true? And she said, yes, I'm with her now. And I said, I don't believe you. Send me a picture. And
it's like seeing is believing, because even at that moment of it feeling surreal, you're like, no, this is, because I think it was about maybe from the day we got the news and the day we flew out to Nigeria, I think it was about two weeks. Now, the fear of that was because like we had to get it ASAP, because apparently if the body's there for too long, you know, like things start happening and stuff.
Exactly.
But I think what it was is that going there was okay, this is real, it's her. And the only, even like now when I think back at it, like thankfully every time I like see my mama's picture, I don't see that. It was only that whole issue of me seeing her exact body, her lifeless body was about for like maybe 2 weeks. But every time I look at her now, like even just, let me show you a picture. Even just when I look at like her now, it's just like, you know, it's not, it's just like, you know, I just like, it just brings me joy. So it's like,
let's see some more.
You know, that's just like, I think it was like
she looks like a lady, you know, very much like Ms Bea, just a lady. And I love how she, you know, looks like she carried.
She loves to pose, like posing, dressing up. I think this was like a 1920s shoot or something.
Oh, like wow. That. Okay. Yeah.
She just, you can just tell, like, she's just a little poser. She just loves to pose, you know. So it's that. Like, so I'm kind of glad that
sharing
that final image of seeing her life hasn't been tarnished. So when I look at her, I still see the beautiful woman.
Yeah, which is really good. Yeah, because I saw my grandmother obviously in the funeral home in St Lucia. No, that initial, on the day itself when I heard the news, like I said to the family members, send me. They said they were with her now, which they had taken her body. She passed away at home, which to me, in my opinion, that was another blessing. She passed away, you know, she collapsed and passed away at home. They put her on the bed. That's where she passed. To me, that's a blessing because, you know, my other grandmother, God rest her soul, my Grenadian gran, she had an accident and passed away on her way to hospital, and that was very difficult. Do you see what I mean? And that's a whole nother story of loss, and that was a few years back. So for me, it's like, okay, Ms Bea passed away at home, but then when they sent me that picture, she'd been moved to the hospital, so I saw her on this hospital bed, like really in that raw state, you know, of lifelessness. Was just, I mean, I screamed my house down. I screamed at that point, because I was just like, there's one thing, my mum, you know, seeing my mum on FaceTime crying and just not knowing what the heck to do. My dad, you know, taking the phone and trying to calm me down and her down and whatever. But to then see that picture, and then, you know, fast forward then another month until I got to see her at the care home in St Lucia in situ, and go, geez, this is real.
That's tough.
And then at that point, they said that they wouldn't be the family here. By the time she came here, it would have been like 2 months by then or something. So the family here wouldn't be able to see her. But actually, when she was brought here, because there's so much that goes into it, and you know, they take them to a special place to be checked and looked and whatever. And they actually said to us that she looked so beautiful, like she was sleeping, that the family here could see her. And so the day before the funeral, we were able to go and see her in the Chapel of Rest. And this was 2 months after her passing. And she still looked immaculate. And again, what a blessing. Do you see what I mean? And that shows, in my opinion, a good soul as well, and a good heart. That 2 months prior, you know, especially when you've passed away in a warm country, you know, it's not something that is usually done. But the fact that she still looked amazing, and the rest of the family here who were unable to accompany us to St Lucia were able to see her and say their goodbyes. So I was also able to see her in the UK funeral parlour as well. So, but well, and actually, I took pictures, which is not something that I've ever done, or you know, I'm not really into that stuff, and I've stored them away, and I have no intention of looking at them, to be honest with you.
Oh, was it
stored away in my mind?
Pictures of before?
Pictures of her in the funeral home in St Lucia and of the funeral home here in the UK. Took pictures of both occasions. Yeah,
that's I couldn't even deal with that.
I know. I didn't. And my cousin did the first time, and then the second time I didn't. It was just, I don't know. I've never been into that stuff before. And when I've seen other people doing things like that, I've always thought, oh, a bit weird. But you can't actually judge until you're in that situation.
Of course,
not you, 100%. I mean me, because I'm talking to myself, because I judged other people and thought, weird, why would you do that? But when you're in that situation, it's like you want every type of last memory that you can get. You know, I wanted a picture of just holding her hand one last time. Do you see what I mean? I felt like I just, you know, have a picture of her there. Not that I'm going to print it. Not that I'm going to put it anywhere. Like, why? But
it's what helps you cope. It's what helps you cope as well. Like, and
maybe that's what it was. Maybe, you know. So it's all sort of put away somewhere in a vault. But obviously, I want to remember her living and breathing and happy, and I have little videos, and you know, I have lots of pictures, and more than anything, I have lots of amazing memories as well. So you know, thank you so much for this chat today. I really appreciate it. It's been good chat.
It's been good, and you know, one thing I'm just so like inspired by is just the strength, and you know, knowing that you have such a good relationship as well. Because, you know, sometimes when people lose people, maybe they don't have the best relationship, but your grandma sounds like the littest woman. Like, you know what I mean? Just sounds like you were just like, you know, and sometimes you often feel like there's a disconnect between generations, but you're talking to her about, boys, this, like, it's like she's just with it. Like, it's not even a case of, we can't talk about that. Let's not do all that. Like,
honestly, I brought all my boyfriends over the years to meet her. You know, they've enjoyed those trips to St Lucia, I'll tell you. Do you know what I mean?
enjoying the food, the
they've all
cooking.
met here first.
No,
Before
they're
they've
enjoying
even met my
everything.
parents, I'm like, right, do you fancy a trip to St Lucia? Because you've got to meet my bestie and the most important woman in my life, my granny. So if you love me, you've got to love her. And everyone who, whether it's past relationships or, you know, girlfriends, just platonic friends, you know, I've had people who have, just because she has the house is quite prominent in the village that we live, and people have just stopped by just to say, hi, you know, I've never met you before, but I'm a friend of your granddaughter Leah. You know, I've worked with her in England and I'm here on a holiday with my family. And I've had that. I've had friends who just travel there, or friends of friends, and they've heard about my granny in this village, and they've stopped and waved, and she would say, come in, you know, come and have a drink, you know, things like that. She was just so inclusive. Everybody was welcome in our home, whether it's St Lucia and even here in the UK. And that's why our family is very much an inclusive family. You'll see so many different races and colours and creeds, because that's what she represented, that we were all welcome, and to stick together and to have a party. And believe you me, my family and I, we know how to party, and that's all because this lady, my lovely, lovely Ms Bea.
I've enjoyed it. I feel like when you tell me story, I can picture it. So you guys have been on the beach, you know, just like having fun, you know, eating on the porch, different things. It just seems like vibrant, and that's the memories you want, you know. Of course, like you know, we don't choose our grief, but we kind of choose what we reconcile with, as you said, you know. I can't understand that period of you going there and doing this, but it's like, this is what she wanted, and so long as I fulfill that, the rest can come later. I can grieve whatever later, as long as I know I've done that, and there's no, like, when it's all said and done, there is no regrets. I gave my grandma the best send off she needed, she wanted. And that's what it's about. That's what it's about, you know.
Again, the grief is going to come. Well, the grief is here, and you know. But at the time, I was like, the grief is coming. It will come and it will stay. I don't think it goes. It doesn't dissipate. You know, and you just have to take every day as it comes. But at that time, I'm privileged. That I was able to do that. I'm privileged that I knew her, privileged that she was chosen to be my grandmother. And I'm privileged that I got to spend all that amazing time with her, because she was a very special lady from before I was born. And by the way, I know you mentioned it off camera earlier about a post that I'd put on Instagram. When my grandmother passed, and I'd explained, and I'll recap just quickly here, that before I was born, my mother, who was only young at the time, she was 19, 20, which in my days, that was, you know, normal, it still is, you know. But she was a young mum, and they gave her my mum was a young mum, they gave her an X-ray for some other unrelated reason. I can't even remember why. I must ask my mum. I keep meaning to sit there and really get all this story from my mum, because I get it a lot. I heard it a lot from my grandmother. And they gave my mum an X-ray, which obviously you shouldn't do to a heavily pregnant woman or any.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, because it's radiation. It's radiation.
Oh,
so, you know, you're radiating an unborn child, like, you know, even a young child, I don't think. Yeah, so they gave her an X-ray and then went, oh, our mistake. Oh my gosh, you're going to have to abort this child, because the amount of radiation we just put on you, this child's going to be very deformed, were the words that they used in those days. And so you're going to have to get rid. My mum was heavily pregnant with me. I mean, that's traumatic in itself, right? And my grandmother said to my mum, doesn't matter if this child turns out to be deformed, as they said, or, you know, disabled, as we would say now. I will look after the child if you can't cope, you know. But she encouraged her to have me and not to be scared. And so my mum wasn't scared, and my mum had me, and here I am. A blessing.
Here you
to
are,
the world.
a blessing, man. A blessing. That's inspirational, man.
But yeah, And yeah, exactly. And so growing up, I'd heard this story, you know, there's so many, every family has their sort of fables and tales and all the rest of it. And that was one story that I knew about me, and that before I was even born, I was wanted by my grandmother at the very least. Do you know what I mean? And my mum was brave enough to have, yeah, and I was fine, but my grandmother did love me, and she did, and even in my later life, like I said, anytime when I was struggling, happy or sad or celebrating, whatever, that is where I went. And by the way, every single birthday for the last 25 years, because our birthdays are 4 days apart, I'm 22nd of October, she's 26th of October, and I would go to her and we'd spend our birthdays together every year. So even if I weren't there for the day, I'd be there the day after or whatever, but every year we spent it together. So it just, you know, this is not like just an easy, oh, she's gone and we just get along with life. Like this is tough, but we are all struggling, and every single member of my family are struggling in all our different ways. Some can speak about it like I can, others can't speak at all. So it really, grief is a horrible thing, isn't it? It's a real horrible thing, and it affects people differently. And some people want to purge and speak and relive memories. And for me, that's what I want to do. You know, having a platform like this, opportunity like this, to raise and lift up my grandmother and say, I had this amazing woman in my life. I prefer to do that than to not speak about her. Yeah, I want the world to know about this amazing woman called Ms Beatrix, you know. I want everyone to know. So it for me, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Jermaine. Mental health.
No, we
Thank
started
you.
recording now. It's good.